close this. Oh, it goes all the way. Okay, so we will recap the steps of building an ontology, and this will be fully based on the reference that I pointed here and pointed last week, Ontology Development 101. In this article, they develop a wine ontology. So, but basically, the steps of building an ontology involve this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So first, if you want to define an ontology to solve your scientific or any questions, we have to define the scope of this ontology. Therefore, we ask competency questions. Competency questions is to be asked as if you are using, so imagine that you are using database that you can search the answers for what you want to ask. So for Juanita's example, the first question you want to ask is what the roles of each proteins or cells or biomarkers, molecular entities interact with each other, how they interact with each other, and so you have actually a lot of actions happening there. The interactions can have a list of how they interact. One is maybe upregulate, another one is downregulate, or I working at one molecular binding to another molecular. All those, there is already ontologies out there that saving those list of actions that is being taken. And then you are asking a question that is a prediction question. You're asking how can I predict biomarker that is involved in autoimmune or cancer, which is a very complex question. I don't know if the database or knowledge base like that can answer your question, but you can certainly find what are the existing molecular entities or cells that are involved in the autoimmune diseases or cancers, or you just choose one autoimmune disease, which is already one autoimmune disease is already very complex, or you can choose one autoimmune process. And then you may see in this process how other molecular entities were involved, how they interact. Perhaps the molecular entity A binding to B, and the B may be involved in the autoimmune process. That is how you might find some connections of relevant biomarkers that may solve your problem. So that is defining the existing knowledge that you stored in the ontology. So ontology is considered as the ground truth of the knowledge. So we should, but we all know that we only know portion of the truth. So we're trying our best to achieve that goal, to representing everything we know faithfully and truthfully as much as we can. Therefore, then you can ask some questions. But for prediction, you might want to apply the ontology for the machine learning predictive analysis to predict. So that are two kind of questions. One is asking what is existing in our knowledge, sea of knowledge there. Another is to predict the future. So we are more focusing on building a knowledge base so that we can query the existing knowledge that will help us to do prediction. Before we do the prediction, we find the connections of all different entities by constructing an ontology. So yeah. So this we went far away, but for the competency questions, you list out all the questions, then you can figure out how how big this ontology will be and what is the scope of this. And then step 2 is consider reusing existing ontologies. This topic related with the FAIR principles. So in ontology development, because we are representing the knowledge of the humankind, we are not going to start off from zero. We first step, after we define the scope of the ontology, we go to look to see what is already built out there. And in this process, you might have a quality assessment process, because nowadays we have thousands of ontologies out there. If you go BioPortal, even if you go Oval Foundry, which is a small set of where developed ontology confined by couple of rules to make ontology have a higher quality, you still find a lot of overlapping ontologies there. So you are looking, so after you scope it out and then you search, and you have a list of existing ontologies with a good quality to consider. And then the step 3 is what kind of a top level ontology I'm going to use. So I will talk more on that. This is related to the top-down strategy when you are building an ontology. In fact, I think nowadays we do more like middle out methodology, because a lot of ontology are already out there. You don't need to, and they already applied top-down, top-level ontology. You just need to start from where they have, and then you might extend them or build a little bit like super classes out of what is already there. Unless we are building something that is totally, there's nothing out there, like Valua, if you're building a closed ontology, probably somebody is doing that, but we don't know. They will not publish. So you are going to think about top-down, which top-level ontology I could use to model my clothes and things. And then the step 4 is you can enumerate the important terms in the ontology that you want to build. This is more like a bottom-up strategy, and I will talk about that more also. The step 5 is to building this conceptual logo. So
could you repeat step 4 again? In your enumerate important terms here, what is that?
Yeah, I will explain that later a little bit more in detail. Sure. So now you put this step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in your mind, right? So I have look at what is already there, and then I look at my top ontology I want to use, and then I list out the important terms. Like for you, Juanita, you will say what macrophage, or what is your, those, those are your important terms in your ontology that you need to list out. And then we are building conceptual logo. That means we started to put the things that can relate together and put them together and define the hierarchy by looking at what existing there, what is not there, or maybe I have to build a hierarchy from 0. And then the step 6 will be, after I build this, I evaluate it, I have maintenance and evolution. So those are related with software or any project development using the agile method, or you have a life cycle for an ontology. So you can choose different strategies to build ontology. Depends on what is out there and what is your scope. So you can use bottom-up, means list all the terms and then build up the hierarchy and the relations. You could also select a top-level ontology that is already had a lot of important, very high-level relations and the concept there, and then I build my terms from that top-level concept down. I can also do the middle out strategy, which is, as I said, very common because there are a lot of things already out there. I choose the top level and then choose domain and then started to expand the domain and adding subclasses. So the FAIR principle, I just reiterate here, I think we all know, findable, interoperable, accessible, and reusable. That applies to the ontology building. Ontology, if an ontology is properly built, it has to be fair. So just keep that in mind. We will revisit this topic by the end of the full course. So this is called top. So this is one example for top-down. We use Barry Smith's basic formal ontology as an example. So in basic formal ontology, we call it buffle. It divided the word into continuant and occurrent, and then they have subclasses: independent, dependent, object side, process, temporal region, spatial temporal region. So everything else in a word or in an ontology will fall under this high-level, top-level ontology. So a lot of open foundry ontology, they use this top-level ontology. So then we look at when at the step 2, we look at those ontologies, we find out they are already using buffle. Okay, I use them all. I don't need to decide my top-level ontology yet. I just use them. But for some specific use cases, they see that I have some terms which doesn't fit well in the buffle structure. They might look at other top-level ontologies. There are multiples out there, and there are a couple of them that relate with the biology or health. But yeah, the buffle is a reverse engineering from the gene ontology. So in general, buffle is very suited for the biological problems or to build biological ontologies. Of course, it has its own challenge as well. And the buffle has been existing for, I think, at least for 40 years, and they're still doing some maintenance or evolution. So this is a bottom-up method. Bottom-up, to list out the key terms and the relations of those terms. What usually we do is looks like this figure out on the right. So we might have a whiteboard and we might have a group, and we put our, like, from the group, we put our different group will recognize what are the important terms for us in this domain, and then listed out there, and then kind of trying to build relations across them. So for this one, the one figure on the left is the design that I had asked you to do after the first class. So you can have kind of a idea of what kind of things I want to relate with each other. But here we are getting more serious thinking, because for this group, this group of concepts might have some relations together. So I put them here, and another chunk of concepts that has some relation. So then we build ontology like bit by bit. So which related to my later topic on modularization. If you are building a very big ontology, you cannot, you have to kind of divide and conquer. So this is one example that I did before for the drug target ontology. It covers a lot of things. So we have kinase and then genes, proteins. Also we have GPCR. So different kind of things that we have to use. Therefore, we use a modularization process to each, like the gene is a big list, and then protein is a big list, and the kinase is a big, all this kinase domain is another big list. So we build a module for kinase only, but then this module will import all those lists, and in the module, we have those relations. And we do it the same for the other modules. And then we import them into the core, detailed core, because for one drug target ontology, it's not only about those 4 categories of drug target. It has to relate with a lot of other things. For example, can be disease or enzyme. Therefore, we have small modules for enzyme, can be, and the disease, and we have external, and then they all kind of we also put the axiom in the separate, and then we eventually build a complete disease drug target ontology. And I have a link here, so you can go there to take a look. So,
Asya, before you move off that slide, would you mind taking just a couple of minutes to sort of talk us through what you do with this? So theoretically, this makes sense that you would go through this process. Certainly, this helps organize knowledge in a space, gets everybody talking on the same thing. But then what are the applied uses of developing this kind of ontology? And again, that may be a topic for another conversation, but if you can just walk us through a couple of minutes of, you've gone through this process, now how are others using it? How does this help this space develop future drug targets, et cetera?
Yeah, so the drug target ontology was used to build a knowledge base. So they have a website to managing this drug target ontology, and then interface with other projects, such as in the CFD. It is part of the CFD links project. So so they have a lot of assays, and they are screening the drugs target. But when you have a chemical, and they like to know their different target classifications. So that is the one use. And then it also was used by another database called druggable genome. So druggable genome, they are listing out the drug target, and then they look at the evidence in the literature, and then they define the levels of the drug target based on their evidence. They call it T-clean, T-dark, T-chem. So based on what evidence they have, and this kind of target looking will be very beneficial to connect with the drug target ontology, because I would see like GPCR or kinase, all those target, how many in different categories. So it's how do I say, it's kind of like knowledge base.
Sure, and it feels like this is very useful. I'm thinking in the context of like common data elements. It sets the language for the space so people know how to talk about their results in a common way. But it also feels like you could search through the ontology and look at other targets that other people have defined within the ontology, and look for, and I think you've said this, I'm sorry if I'm just reiterating it, but effectively using the ontology as a knowledge space to identify other potential, avenues of research, et cetera. So there's already knowledge existing here. If I go up to the subclass that's right above the target that I'm talking about, I can look at everything else that's within this subclass and say, oh, these might be relevant as well. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yes. So
okay, cool.
Let me go back to this slides from my previous class. What is an ontology? So ontology is a way, the first class we talk about looking at the philosophy. So it's a way of systematically explain of the things are out there, what the essence of things, and what existing of the things. And it was used by knowledge engineering, artificial intelligence, and computer science. So here is the key sentence. Ontology is a form of knowledge-based representation, and that will support expert system to solve different problems, if that makes sense to you. So then we organize the key concepts in hierarchies, and then we look at the relations between them, and then we add the constraints and logical definitions. Ontology is a whole system for representing knowledge. So knowledge has, if you are thinking about knowledge, you have to add these constraints and logical definitions to differentiate them. So if I learn female, okay, so now we cannot say female, biological female, if you have exome XX, is a chromosome XX, it is totally disjoint with a person who has a chromosome XY. Is that the correct in the whole world? I think we can claim that yes, because, oh, maybe no. Because yes, so let's say this is right, because there is nobody who has a chromosome XX, and then they have also another set of chromosome XY. They might, yeah. So they might
which
have,
is sort of that logical framework
we don't
around
know.
the ontology. Yeah.
So maybe, yeah. So those kind of things we need to logically define. Then the whole system will be consistent. So the most important thing when you build out an ontology, if you add those logical definitions, then you run a reasoner to check if there is inconsistency. Like in the database, we often have those inconsistencies in the database, right? But if we are building a high quality ontology, we always check the inconsistency. We check out the definitions, we will find it out, and then we resolve it, and then we publish it. So that is a value of an ontology.
So those knowledge mostly have already been published. I mean, that have their own database set earlier, or you have to build it your own, or you just apply all those database together and then build a new ontology.
Can you say it again?
Okay, so for example, you have your ontology question, and you have relevant of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that you have, once you find the dependable, or what do you call, relevant to each other, you have to build your database of each of this, or you already have you already have those database.
Yes, so yeah, so this will relate to the step 2. When you have those questions, you look at what is already out there. For biomedical, for your question, I know a lot of things is already out there.
But if you don't have it, you have to build you have to create it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Based on the knowledge that already have.
Okay. Yeah. So